Hello everyone, welcome back to Major Hi-Fi. I'm Luke. Today we're going to be looking at quite an exciting headphone. This is the new headphone from Meze. It is the Elite. It comes in this gigantic case, and let's go on ahead and see what's inside. Like I'm opening something that, like, I don't know, the mob would put money in to pay for a hitman or something. I don't know what it says about me that's the first thing that comes to mind. All right, so not a lot is in here. Most of this is just foam to protect your headphones. You really would look quite intimidating, I guess, walking into, well, I'm not quite sure, the situation where you'd carry your headphone suitcase the studio, or like, I don't know, if maybe you would go to the library. I don't know. These cost $4,000, so I don't know where you go with them exactly. I don't, like, I'm not saying you shouldn't go anywhere. I just am trying to think of like a place you might take these with you. But wherever that place would be, you would definitely look very cool putting this out on the table. Inside, first of all, we have the cable. This is a 4-pin mini XLR cable. And then for the termination, we have 3 different options. You can get a 6.3 millimeter, 3.5 millimeter, or 4-pin XLR connector. I forget what the word for this is, but it's that braided kind of rope-like texture on the cable. It's very flexible, which I like. It's not stiff in any way. You know, like you just sort of, as you can see, lots of slack there, which I appreciate. I do not want a stiff headphone cable. We also get 2 additional ear pads here. One set is made of this Alcantara material, and then the other one is a combination of leather and the Alcantara material. But the main event is the headphones themselves, of course. Here are the Elite. They are quite fancy looking, which I would hope so. Definitely a similar build to the Empyrean. Quite a nice flexible headphone. As you can see, like, they're very, very movable. They kind of almost start to just move and shift around in your hands, which is great for getting the right fit and whatnot. If I put them on, you'll see they don't actually have as tight of a grip as they might sort of appear to. It's actually almost an unusually loose grip. Not in the way that they don't feel secure, but it does not exert really any pressure from the sides onto your head, which I think is good. It does mean the majority of the weight is being carried by the top of the headband, which is always going to be true to an extent, but sometimes some of that weight is put into sort of, you know, the pressure that's being pushed on the sides. This is almost purely carried by the top here, but they're surprisingly light. Like, they are way lighter than their look suggests. You know, they're not light as a feather, but for what you would think for a headphone of this size, it's not the weight you would expect, and you're not gonna have a problem wearing these for hours. At least I didn't, and I mean, look at me, I'm not very strong, so if I can do it, you can do it. I think so. And yeah, they're very comfortable. These ear pads are extremely soft. As you can see, they're definitely some of the more comfortable ear pads on the market right now, and they have a nice kind of velvety lining on them. Okay, right, these are the Alcantara ones. These are the leather ones, because these have a leathery outer, okay, yeah, pretty obvious there. We figured it out. We can adjust these if we want to. It's just a sort of pull-out system. You gotta go pretty slowly. You don't wanna be forcing a headphone like this in any direction. And then we can just push it back in. Nice arching aluminum build on the headband here, a really nice sturdy frame. And then this kind of leather piece here that actually acts as the headband. Definitely pretty funky looking headphones overall, and like I said, I like the sort of flexibility of them, the durability, and I'm overall a big fan of the looks. I think they're pretty stylish looking, very high tech. They've got this nice triangular pattern, or sort of, I don't know what shape you'd call this, but a very cool pattern going on the back here, on the grills. These have a number of different innovations going on that kind of give them that elite status, I suppose. For starters, we have this fully new design, new tuning on the driver, which was made in collaboration with Renaro Isodynamics, and this is an isodynamic driver. These also use a low mass acoustic diaphragm in addition to these hybrid ear pads, which I talked about before with the leather Alcantara mix. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And then the aluminum frame is made through this complicated CNC process that allegedly takes up to 20 hours per headphone. So the man hours are being put in to make these, rest assured, and that kind of starts to make sense for the price tag. And these have a frequency response of 3 Hz to 112 kilohertz and an impedance of 32 ohms. All right, so time to talk about how they sound. All right, so soundstage-wise, I was definitely expecting a lot of width based on what I've heard in the past from Meze, and I was not disappointed. These are certainly a very, very wide headphone. What stuck out to me the most, though, was the sound separation, which was just unusually airy, and I don't mean the bad type of unusual. There is a ton of kind of mistiness to this headphone. I felt like there was a very nice kind of dissipating quality to the sound. The placement of instruments is pretty realistic, but it definitely does expand kind of past the point of, reasonability and into that more extra expanded sound, which I prefer. I like a natural soundstage, but I don't need it to be so natural that we're getting less width than is possible. By all means, push things as far as you can with whatever technologies are being put into the headphone. And of course, as we know with a lot of Meze headphones, the technology going on is often very, very fine-tuned and, well built. The soundstage on these felt kind of deceivingly understated because it's so calm and serene sounding with all those airiness going on. You kind of get this very laid back feel to the imaging, but then you'll have these moments of extreme cinematic depth that really give you those sort of spine shivering sensations. So it's a nice balance of not being so wide that it's like that kind of holographicness that thins things out because everything's being kind of pulled apart and made overly porous. But definitely it is going to be very, very airy. So if you're down for that sound, for a nice kind of lofty feel, then these are going to be a great choice for you. Hey guys, Luke here. Just wanted to pop in and say that if you're enjoying this video, it would be great if you could subscribe and hit the bell to get notified when we make new content, and hit the like button and leave us a comment if you have any suggestions or questions or anything like that. I would love to talk to you guys more. We would really love some help growing the channel and, just want to make sure that we're reaching our audience and whatnot. So yeah, any support is greatly appreciated, and let's get back to the review. All right, so low end, this has a pretty light touch to it. It's not a super intense headphone overall, which is, I think, nice. It's definitely got some similarities in timbre here and there to the Empyrean, but I will say that the Empyrean to me feels like a more intense kind of thud. To me, this is a bit more of a sort of organic light sound. And the low end is kind of the first building block in creating this more sort of soft edged feel. So it's a very open, delicate low end that kind of errs more on the side of pulling out timbre and texture as opposed to just boosting those essential, really booming frequencies to create a lot of heaviness. Because of how kind of airy and intensely separated the soundstage on this is, you'll find those kind of kick sounds and bass sounds and whatnot almost feel a bit unfamiliar because of how kind of defined of a position they've been given and how specific of a place they're in the mix. They're really not going to bleed at all into other elements. So I found myself kind of hearing the low end of certain songs I've heard a million times, really given that defined spot that allows it to shine on its own. And that was very interesting because you sort of get a bit more of a ability to zero in on what's going on down there than you might have had when listening to it on other headphones. What I liked most about the low end on these was that they had a nuance to them that definitely made them just as enjoyable at lower volumes as they were at higher volumes. I didn't feel like volume was a factor in terms of getting a really, really gratifying low end out of these. It just, like I said, is focusing more on timbre and texture than it is on just tons of boosting of those really intense areas. So I like that it just sort of spoke for itself with the actual color of the sound and not so much just the intensity of the sound. It's definitely hard to pull off a low end that's more understated like that without making it feel like the headphone is lacking or is thinned out. So it's a much more complicated low end handling than you maybe have heard on a lot of other headphones. And I think that Meze chose this route because they knew that they could pull it off, and they definitely do. All right, so the mid-range on the Elite is very subdued and filtered, which is not surprising to me given that they have that very soft edge to them. For me, the kind of more recessed high mid and neutral low mid that's going on in here allowed for a very realistic sound, as like resonance and, excess warmth and sharpness are qualities that do exist in real life, but are definitely much more so implemented by listening devices than they are by our ears. So I like when a lot of resonance and sharpness is avoided because only so much of it really exists in the real world. I mean, it does exist, obviously, for many sounds just through your ears, you know, in nature or whatever. But I find that a lot of resonance I hear in mixes is often just brought out by my speakers or headphones I'm using, and not so much by the actual instruments or by the recordings, whatnot. So I like that this is eliminating the resonance and the sharpness because it brings out a much more natural character from the sound. Like listening to Amy Winehouse, for example, she has this kind of metallic undertone to her voice that just sort of lays a bit set back, but some headphones do choose to bring out a lot more than I want to, and this was able to kind of insert those small doses of that sound without overdoing it. So it's that kind of filtered modulated mid-range that still gives those essential boosts here and there to make sure that things are forward, and that those little pockets of kind of ear candy are still being brought out. So if you want a subdued high mid and don't want a ton of saturation or extra body given to the low mids, you're okay with them staying a bit more on the kind of you know, unassuming side, then this could be a really perfect sound for you. I would say that the mid-range on these probably does err more on the side of transparency than it does intense coloring, and that's once again what lends to that softer edge and that more natural sound, because not a lot is being kind of intensified. All right, so the high end. This is where some people might either be turned way off or way on by these, because they are pretty bright for sure. There's a pretty distinct gloss, shine, whatever word you want to use to them. You know, as goes with their mid-range and their low end, these definitely once again err more on the side of detail and articulation than they do on just boosting things. So a lot of that brightness is not just coming from a pure, you know, overarching boost on the high end. It's somewhat being brought out, or maybe mostly being brought out just by the detail retrieval, but it is still brightness at the end of the day, no matter how it's being created. I don't see the brightness on this offending anybody, but I do see it being much more fitting of people who like a brighter sound than I do of someone who wants a you know, more softened low end, especially someone who wants a darker sound might find these a bit bright for their taste. I would say that the high end on these is probably the least transparent part of their tuning. It's the most kind of inflected and slightly colored, I would say. Though coloring on the highs tends to lend itself to getting rid of some of that gloss or shine, you know, some saturation. This does not do that so much as it kind of, once again, brings out more brightness through this kind of unique color and handling it takes. So the high end on these kind of adds a nice tint to the sound. It brings back some of the edge that's been a bit smoothed out by the low end and the mid-range. You know, it's not afraid of pushing things up a few notches, but it seems to know its limits and knows how much brightness can be added without there being you know, any sense of over, you know, harshness or hissing, and definitely no sibilance whatsoever. So very appreciative of the ability to boost the high end, but not do it in a kind of overbearing way. Always want to be really mindful of that with any bright headphone. So overall, this is, you know, of course, a very big ticket item. This is going to be, you know, one of the most luxurious headphones on the market, and it's going to also be up against some of the most luxurious headphones on the market, which is quite stiff competition. It competes exceptionally well. They definitely seem to sort of separate themselves from the pack with this very signature airiness they have to them. They have a very natural controlled sound that really does enrich the music in a nice way, but in a way that does not feel over embellishing. That's not sort of taking too many liberties with the sound. It's more so trying to give you just as much clarity as is, you know, technologically possible. So I would just say that for me, this felt like it really did meet the standard that Meze has set for, like, you know, their other headphones, which is quite a high standard given sort of their positioning in the, you know, high-end headphone market. Of course, they do make some less expensive headphones, which I also am a big fan of, but, you know, in their higher price range, this does meet the standard, and it's quite a high one. It's impressive in its sound, less so because it's pushing a ton of really, you know, crazy things in your face, and more so it's because it's pulling everything back and letting it all breathe a ton. I think that this is going to be quite a hit for a lot of headphone fans and whatnot, or just audiophiles of all sorts. I'm really curious to see what other people think of them. If you've listened to these before, you know, you probably haven't, they like just came out. But, you know, once anyone has gotten their hands on a pair, leave a comment, let's talk about these. I wanna hear your thoughts too. You can also feel free to post in the Major Hi-Fi forum if you want to discuss these there. I will also link to Major Hi-Fi's headphone ranking tool, where these will be alongside basically every other headphone on the market. I will be back very soon with some more videos and reviews. And until next time, happy listening.